All right, so now we are going to work on diving into our text and reading for the day, kind of looking at, as it says here at this beginning, the context for the conflict, which is, of course, again, the origins of slavery. And starting here, we are having a quote from a leader of the Confederacy, but up at the top here, I'm going to start reading where it says, "The role of slavery in bringing on the Civil War has been hotly debated for decades. One important way of approaching the issue is to look at what contemporary observers had to say." And contemporary means like the people who were there, so kind of primary sources. In 1861, Alexander H. Stephens, Vice President of the Confederate States of America, was quoted in the Savannah Republic, which was a newspaper. So from reading this, I can tell that, like I mentioned in the previous video, sometimes people want to say that the Civil War was about other things besides slavery, like states' rights or the economy, trying to really downplay this role of slavery. Sometimes because they don't want to make it seem like that they fought a war to try to keep people in chains in this horrible human rights travesty. But as this first paragraph explains, the best way to kind of see, well, what did they actually fight this war over, is to listen to primary sources, a good historical tool as always. So our primary source that I'm about to read in this like orangey color here is from the Vice President of the Confederacy, and he's a good source because if anyone's going to know why the Confederacy seceded and started the Civil War, it would probably be someone who was leading the Confederacy. So I'm going to read this quote here in orange and try to break it down and explain what it is saying and understanding it for myself. So starting with the quote. "The new Constitution has put at rest forever all the agitating questions relating to our peculiar institution, African slavery, as it exists among us, the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization. This was the immediate cause of the late rupture and present revolution. Jefferson, in his forecast, had anticipated this as the rock upon which the old Union would split. He was right. What was conjecture or an argument with him is now a realized fact. Our foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the white or to the superior race is his natural and normal condition." So when I read that, first of all, my reaction is, well, wow, that's very racist. But of course, that was how the Confederacy was based on. But in the first section there, it says, of course, that the Constitution or the foundation of the Confederacy rests upon the essentially belief that they had that slavery was right, that they believed that Black people were inferior to whites. And he's saying, as you can see where my cursor is right now, that this would be the rock upon which the old Union would split or the United States would be broken up. And he was right. And then the second paragraph, our foundations are laid upon this racist belief. So he is saying, this Vice President of the Confederacy, that the foundation of the reason they split from the United States was because of their belief in slavery. He's not saying it was because we were upset about the economics. He's not saying it was because we were wanting to have power in Congress. Really, it's ultimately about slavery. But as we're going to see, it expands out into these other issues. Here in the bottom, there's another paragraph that says, "Today, most professional historians agree with Stephens that slavery and the status of African Americans were at the heart of the crisis that plunged the U.S. into a civil war from 1861 to 1865. This is not to say that the average Confederate soldier fought to preserve slavery or the average Union soldier fought to end slavery. Some fought on moral grounds, some fought because they felt their way of life and prosperity were threatened, and others fought to preserve the Union. Soldiers fight for many reasons, notably to stay alive and support their comrades in arms. The North's goal in the beginning was the preservation of the Union, not emancipation. For the 880,000 African Americans who ultimately served in the U.S. in the war, however, emancipation was the primary aim." So what this says to me is that while the war ultimately happened because of slavery, not every individual soldier who was fighting it was believing, like if you asked him if you could have a time machine and say, why did you fight this war? They wouldn't say, oh, slavery. I believe in slavery so strongly, or I want it to end, that I'm going to fight this war. They fought for various different reasons as soldiers, but ultimately the reason that this war happened was because of slavery. So If I were to explain this, I would say, well, this primary source shows me that the leader of the, or vice president, one of the leaders of the Confederacy, was saying himself that this is why the war happened, was because of the issue of slavery and disagreements about it. And that's how I could explain that in my own words and use a quote from there. So what you are going to be doing next is, if you go down, the next picture is where I'm on right now, where it says this paragraph, the roots of the crisis over slavery that crippled the nation. And you are going to read this yourself. And this is going more into the origins of, well, slavery didn't just come out of nowhere. It had a long history. And before the 1800s, there is a lot to know about it and see how it had such power and why this was such a dividing issue that's going to turn the country to a full-on war where they're fighting each other. So for the rest of the lesson, there are various different pages here, along with some images, just pictures kind of to show you like a more hands-on account of what this actually looked like. And you're going to read these. There are some specific questions for you to answer. And then you are going to write at the end, kind of bring it all together, a short written response. And then we'll have a closeout video after that. So make sure you are, again, reading, identifying kind of like what are the main points of this specific section, answer some literal comprehension questions, and then you're going to explain your what you learned all together at the end. So that's what we're doing for today's lesson. Let me know if you have any questions as you do this on your own time.